Hi, it's Kristen Buckles, Editor-in-Chief at the University of Arizona Press. In honor of the Western History Association Conference, we are pleased to present the following short videos about some of our newest titles in history. A huge thank you goes out to the authors who created these videos. We really hope you enjoy them, and we hope you have a great conference.
I'm speaking to you today about my book, Strong Hearts and Healing Hands, that the University of Arizona Press published in 2021. It is a book about the intersection of Western medicine coming among the tribes of Southern California, but only those tribes living within the Mission Indian Agency. There were a number of Native Americans who lived along the coast of California, but they were excluded from the Mission Indian Agency and excluded from any relationship with the United States because settlers wanted to steal their land, and this would make it much easier, and has been much easier, that most of the tribes along the coast, except for one group of Chumash, are not recognized by the United States. So the Indian Service in the early 20th century started providing medical care on a limited basis to the 29 reservations and 7 Native American tribes here in Southern California. So my book deals with the beginning of this relationship, this medical relationship, but especially highlights the field nurses who came here in 1928, from 1928 to 48. It was a group of white women who were professional nurses, public health nurses. So the field nurses worked hand in hand with the tribes, with the leadership of the tribal people as well as individuals on a very personal level. They created trust relationships with one another. And as a result of this, they formed a partnership to fight infectious diseases among the tribes. It was devastating the people at the time. And of course, the big killer was tuberculosis. And so unlike what we've seen in the United States with the division of people over the pandemic, there was a coming together gradually of Native people and doctors, nurses, and the Saboba Indian Hospital to fight diseases over time. So although it's a tragic story of deaths and suffering from diseases, it's also a positive story about people working together and coming to grips with the various diseases and defeating them. The death records show that there was a tremendous decline in the 1930s and especially in the 1940s to infectious diseases, including tuberculosis, which was endemic here, and there was no streptomycin to fight it. So this is a story that's both a Native story and a story of Western medicine healthcare providers. And without the tribal people agreeing to help out, there would have been no relationship at all, and this would not have worked.
Yat Farina King Yinishye. Hello, my name is Farina King, and I'm one of the 3 co-authors of the book, Returning Home. And this is a picture of the cover here. I'll show you. I started to work on this book several years back with Dr. Mike Taylor first, who reached out to me about a special collection at Utah State University featuring the student works from the Intermountain Indian Boarding School, which was one of the largest federal Indian boarding schools in the United States. And it opened in the 1950s primarily for Dene youth. And Mike knew that I had already been studying and primarily looking at Navajo boarding school experiences since my first book, The Earth Memory Compass, looked at those kinds of educational experiences in the 20th century. I had always been drawn to boarding school experiences because of the stories of my family, especially my father, WHA. And my dad always inspired me by learning about the kind of struggles he faced as a child and the challenges he went through. And those stories were very empowering for me. So, of course, I was excited to get involved in this collaboration with Mike and James. And we've been a great team together in bringing this book, which is really offering a platform to feature direct sources from boarding school students, and mostly Dene, even though the school did become intertribal in its last 10 years or so. And it really adds to the stories and understandings of boarding schools, because most studies had primarily focused on the early 20th century. And we're considering how most federal Indian boarding schools had closed, by the 1920s, with the Merriam Report that openly criticized the federal Indian boarding school policy. So Intermountain brought a lot of different perspectives, and what was really powerful about it is how active the alumni are, that there's a couple of Intermountain alumni associations that regularly gather, and they are celebrating their experiences, even though they absolutely recognize the hardship and assimilationist agenda of boarding schools like Intermountain. They celebrate and honor what they went through and the accomplishments they had and have, and the friendships and familial relationships that they developed while away from home. So what's interesting about this book is how we focus on the concept of returning home, because there were these different creative works of students, the poetry, the arts, and we wanted to make sure that these archives that remained in northern Utah and Brigham City became accessible to Dene communities and the former students, survivors of boarding schools, their relations, and the Navajo Nation. I think there's a lot of work still to be done with especially understanding the intertribal boarding school years at Intermountain, and more boarding school stories and perspectives, because there's not just one experience that can brushstroke through them all. And the image that you see here that we focused on is from one of the Intermountain Indian School students, a Dene student, Robert Chi, and it really embodies the foundations of our book, that we were doing the best we can to have a community-based project, have parts in Dene Bazad, because as we connected with Dene families of Intermountain alumni and community, and a lot of people had different connections to Intermountain because it was such a large boarding school that would have up to 2,000 students at a time. And it was open from the 1950s to 1984. We saw this image and thought about how much family, kinship means to Dene people, and how the students, through their poetry, through their arts, and different ways that they found to sustain their cultures and to connect with their cultures. In that way, they were returning home through their works that we were examining and sharing in this book. And then we were also hoping through this book and the traveling exhibit that we also did to bring these student voices and their sources home. So that was really a wonderful experience for us. And we're so fortunate that we've done this together and with so many people who made this possible, especially the University of Arizona Press, that are creating this book in actual a tangible form. and you'll see, different flyers and announcements about it, some possible, discounts to always look for. So we hope that everyone enjoys this book, but it is especially for us who we had in mind were and are Dene communities and families, the survivors of boarding schools, and those who were able to see beauty always around them, hajo, in all that they're seeking to do and learn in their life experiences. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you enjoy the book and continue these important conversations and opportunities to learn, especially right now as we are acknowledging those who did not survive boarding schools and starting to unpack the complicated layers and meanings of boarding schools, especially in settler colonialism and dynamics of power, dispossession, and control. That in all that, I hope we never forget and always remember Indigenous lives and peoples, and support Indigenous communities as we heal through such intergenerational trauma and dynamics. Thank you all.
Hi, I'm Mike Taylor. I'm an assistant professor of English and of American Indian Studies at Brigham Young University. I'm thrilled to introduce at least a portion of our book to you. It's been an absolute pleasure working with Drs. Farina King and James Swenson, and most importantly, working alongside surviving alumni of the Intermountain Indian School. As the title of the book suggests, the main purpose of this book was to return home the archived materials, the original works of young Dene students, bring it back to them, to their surviving families, to their communities, and then to contextualize those works in a way that help readers recognize the resilience of Dene youth, help them recognize how these boarding school students, though removed from home, continue to contribute to the cultural and literary histories and realities of the Navajo Nation and their surrounding communities. And I can't wait for you all to get to encounter the works that have been for such a long time accessible only through archives. Many of these students' creative works, both their visual art and their creative writing, are not just contextually important because of the way they provide a window into the Intermountain boarding school experience, but aesthetically and culturally and innovatively, they also offer an exciting window into that era of Navajo or Dene literary and artistic history. They, in many ways, fill in a gap of that boarding school era with the creative works that would have been created at home, that could have been created at home, but that were created to keep students connected to home while in many ways forced to be away. So I'm so thrilled for you all to get a chance to see, to read, and to enjoy the creativity of these resilient Dene youth.
Hello, I'm Mario Garcia.
And I'm Ellen McCracken, and we're co-editors of Rewriting the Chicano Movement, New Histories of Mexican-American Activism in the Civil Rights Era, published in 2021 by the University of Arizona Press. We're both professors at the University of California, Santa Barbara.
The Chicano movement was the largest and most widespread civil rights and empowerment movement by people of Mexican descent in the United States in the 1960s and 1970s. It made Chicanos into national political players, as well as achieving breakthroughs in educational attainment, political representation, and cultural validation. These gains were the result of mass mobilizations and direct action. Our book captures the spirit of the movement, while at the same time rewriting it to present new histories and new perspectives.
The role of Chicanas was critical in the movement, and Professor Tiffany Gonzalez, in her essay, addresses the important role of Chicanas in electoral politics in Texas.
Brown Berets are one of the better known groups in the movement. In his essay, Omar Valerio Jimenez discusses the role of the Berets as public historians as they traversed part of the Southwest in the early 1970s, educating Chicanos about their history by staging public reoccupations of Mexican-American lands.
Unsung activists are part of rewriting the Chicano movement. My essay brings to light the role of Roque Garcia as a community leader in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And in another chapter, Andrea Munoz focuses on Vita Cuaron as one of the key student leaders of the 1968 blowouts in East Los Angeles.
While the Chicano anti-war movement is one of the major manifestations of the movement, it has mostly been focused on the national moratorium in East Los Angeles in 1970. Jesus Jesse Esparza rewrites his history by bringing our attention to the important Chicano anti-war protest in Houston. Chicano students, at the same time, were very significant in the movement, although we don't know much about this history in California and the Southwest. Patrick Fuentes revises this by his study of the Chicano student movement at Fresno State.
The Chicano Renaissance was the artistic and literary explosion that accompanied the Chicano movement. The history of this Renaissance is augmented in essays by Juan Pablo Mercado, Holly Barnett Sanchez, Tim Drescher, and Michael Anthony Turcios, as they explore the role of Chicana and Chicano muralists in a new and refreshing way.
There is an emerging historiography of the Chicano movement, and our new book, Rewriting the Chicano Movement, is part of this rewriting by presenting new insights on the movement. Thanks very much.
And we hope you enjoy the book.
Hello, this is Carol Goldberg and Dwayne Champaign. We're here to tell you about our new book, A Coalition of Lineages, the Fernandino Tatavian Band of Mission Indians. It's the product of more than a decade of collaboration with the tribe in connection with their effort to achieve federal recognition. Here's the book. We're pleased to say that the research for this book produced some new insights about social and political organization of indigenous communities in Southern California, as well as new understanding of the legal actions that were used by the colonizers to dispossess the tribe from its ancestral territories.
We think that's one of the main contributions of the book, is that the history of colonialism in Southern California was not well described or analyzed, and we are hoping to create an alternative analysis and understanding of that whole part of history.
So we hope you'll be interested to see the book. It has numerous appendices and lots of sources from the archives and oral history interviews and other work we undertook in connection with this very gratifying project.
Yeah, this was a book that was done in together with collaborating with the tribe, and they in fact read our texts, analyzed our texts, gave us lots of suggestions.
Thanks so much.
Hello, I'm Susan Dean Smith, Associate Professor in the History Department at UT Austin, and I'm here with my co-editors Maruna Akeem and Sandra Rosenthal to give a brief introduction to our new book, Museum Matters, Making and Unmaking Mexico's National Collections. This volume is shaped by an intensive generative 2-day workshop attended by the contributors that helped us to focus and sharpen the interdisciplinary conversation among our 10 authors, all prominent scholars based in the Mexican and Anglo-American academies.
Hello, I am Miruna Akeem, and I'm a professor in the Humanities and Social Sciences Division at the Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana Coajimalpa in Mexico City. This is a book about things, stones, relics, bones, fakes, and natural history specimens that made up Mexico's National Museum complex over the course of 2 centuries of collecting and display. Organized thematically in 3 sections, canons, fragments, and disturbances, the 10 contributions authored by historians, art historians, curators, and anthropologists focus on specific case studies to show how national collections, ever in flux, are shaped by different interests, negotiations, conflicts, acts of memory and forgetting, as well as accidents, loss, and serendipitous occurrences.
Hi, I'm Sandra Rosenthal, and like Miruna, I'm a professor at the Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana in Coajimalpa, Mexico City. The text and the volume are joined by the original artwork on the book's cover by Mexican artist Mariana Castillo de Val, a wire sculpture that unwinds the shape of one of Mexico's most emblematic objects, the coyoshauqui. The many shadows and reflections cast by the piece that you can see here behind me evoke many of the book's arguments and invite us to think of museum objects through their layered histories and multiple uses and meanings. We really hope that this volume is helpful to scholars as well as others interested in museums and collections in Mexico and beyond.
Open Mikantoish. Hi, I'm Sim Schneider, and I'm happy to be promoting my book, The Archaeology of Refuge and Recourse, Coast Miwok Resilience and Indigenous Hinterlands in Colonial California. My book presents the last 20 years of collaborative archaeological and historical research on the indigenous Coast Miwok peoples of coastal Central California and their experiences of Spanish, Mexican, Russian, and American colonialism. Indigenous homelands and home waters are at the center of this analysis. And in this book, I explore the concepts of refuge, recourse, and indigenous resilience. So Native peoples resisted multiple periods of colonial intrusion, often on their own terms, and by seeking refuge and protection and safety within their homelands. Coast Miwok people also decided when and how to engage with new ideas, new people, and new materials arriving in late 18th century and 19th century California. And Coast Miwok people, my ancestors, were also future-oriented. They resisted colonialism and they rebuilt their communities to remain relevant and connected to the places that still mattered to them. Thank you for reading.
Hi, my name is Wes Bernardini, and I'd like to introduce a new University of Arizona Press book titled Becoming Hopi, A History. The book has 4 editors, 2 archaeologists, myself and Greg Schachner from UCLA, along with 2 Hopi tribal members, Lee Kwanwasioma, the founding director of the Hopi Cultural Preservation Office, and Stuart Koyemtua, the current director. Together, we assembled archaeological evidence, Hopi oral traditions, historical records, and ethnography to present a comprehensive history of the people of the Hopi Mesas. We're proud to have written a truly collaborative book that combines indigenous voices with scientific approaches in a way that respects and enhances both perspectives. The book is full of colorful illustrations and is written in an approachable style, making it a valuable resource for anyone who wants to learn about the rich and diverse history of the Hopi people and their enduring connection to the American Southwest.